How's it going, Andrew?
Morning, Matt.
Yeah.
Yep, we're back. We're here. We're doing another podcast. And yeah, I'm excited. Good to see you, bud.
Another pod. Good to see you too. You know, the day this episode comes out is the day the Rusty Nail is happening.
Big Rust.
I'm excited.
I'm excited too. I mean, I'm not going to be there, but I'm excited for you.
Yeah. I mean, probably not, but I'm also banking on your wife probably being tired of you being home within about the first 12 hours of you having the kid. I feel like you're going to irritate her and she's going to kick you out of the house.
My wife never wants me to leave the house.
I don't know. You're probably,
I am annoying in long spurts of time.
You said it, not me.
Hey, what the hell?
Yeah, no, I'm really excited for this tonight. So this should be good. But
cool. So how's social media been going?
It's been going. We have one follower on X. That would be you.
Dude, I'm a big shot.
I don't know. So X is a weird platform for me because I was never on Twitter personally. I've never really used it until now. So I just kind of have the page there as a placeholder more than anything. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe eventually it'll become like a useful tool for us, but I'm focusing more on the Instagram and the Facebook because I'm just more familiar with those platforms. Eventually I would like us to start doing some stuff with our TikTok, but
do short clips.
Yeah.
Like you could do little mini topics. Yeah, I think that's awesome. I mean, we've been talking so long about the importance of Masons being relevant and using social media. So I feel like as a podcast, we do our best. We're working to try to learn.
We are. And I've managed Facebook pages before and it's different now though, because it's so much bigger than it was. And it was so much easier to get yourself into the algorithm and get noticed before. And I feel like now it's all a matter of like people sharing it, liking it. You know, you really need that post engagement count to go up. And I don't know, maybe if we start doing like some videos, like some TikTok videos and
we can cross-post it on Reels.
Yeah, cross-post it to Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. Maybe that'll help out. But, if you listen to us and you're on Facebook, Instagram, or X or TikTok, look up Time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew.
Shameless plugs.
Shameless plug.
We literally planned this just to get you guys to follow us. Get your follows on here, lads. And, while you're at it, honestly, we've been loving doing this podcast. And I know if you've been listening this long, you probably like us a little bit. And if you think anyone else would like us, please reach out and let people know about our podcast, because honestly, the best way this has been spreading is through word of mouth and, through us meeting people or people talking about it. So if you know any Masons who you think could benefit from our content, just let them know. We'd love to have more listeners and we'd like you to join us all in fellowship.
Right.
What's better than that?
We always want more people at fellowship, right? And speaking of getting more people invested or joining us for fellowship, keep your eyes out for our 2024 marketing strategy.
Oh,
business cards.
Yep, we got new business cards.
Lodges soon with QR codes. Give them to your friends.
Yep, we got some fun business cards. They look pretty swanky, to be honest. I like how they turned out. And speaking of fellowship, we're actually, it's very topical, because today we're actually going to be talking about what is fellowship. We're Time for Fellowship, but what the heck is it?
Ooh, that's a good question.
So we're going to be exploring today what fellowship is, why it's important, and what it means to our fraternity.
Ooh, let's get into it then.
Let's get some music.
Loosen up your ties and roll up your sleeves. It's time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin or any other Grand Lodge or any appended body.
All right, so we're going to talk about fellowship today. I thought it'd be a cool topic because it's in our name. And we say it a lot. I hear it all over Masonry. We're doing fellowship. We're having fellowship. Fellowship this, fellowship that. And I was actually listening to another podcast last week, and it's the Art of Manliness podcast. Pretty interesting. And honestly, there's a lot of Masonic crossovers within that. It's my understanding that one of the founder, Mr. McKay, is a brother in Oklahoma. I'm 90% sure. I haven't confirmed it for sure, but I saw someone say that, yeah, he's a member of a certain lodge out there. So it's kind of sometimes funny because I can almost tell because some of the topics he's interested in, it's not a Masonic podcast, but they resonate with Masonry. And he did a cool episode on the virtues of the Hobbit and J.R.R. Tolkien's virtues that he puts within his works. And one of those virtues was fellowship, the Fellowship of the Ring, for example. And they started talking about it, and I started going, oh, I kind of really think this is a cool thing to talk about because fellowship is something that has been instrumental to the success of our fraternity since the beginning.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would say that we do have to differentiate between fellowship as the way we're going to be defining it here and fellowship in its common Masonic usage, I feel like. Because in its common Masonic usage, a lot of times fellowship is we're going to go out and do something fun that's not ritual or a business meeting or trustees meeting or whatever. We use it as it's our let your hair down time, right?
Even though that is all contained within fellowship. I would say that the way Masons use it, where we say it's fun time, is fellowship on steroids. It's heavy cementing with the trowel, where you're really trying to create a fellowship. So before we get into it, we should define our terms.
There you go.
So more or less, what I'm going to be comparing is we use the word fellowship and friendship interchangeably. And the reason we do that is because they play with each other. Friendship is a one-on-one personal connection that you have with an individual. So it's intimate. It's very close. Fellowship is a common, shared, collective belonging. So it's like a larger version of it's a little less intimate, but it is a common identity or purpose shared amongst people. So from fellowship can be gained friendships, and friendships develop within fellowships.
So you're telling me I can enjoy fellowship with other people without being friends with them?
Correct. Yeah. So it's an interesting topic because it's identified as a virtue within Freemasonry because this is how we establish the universal brotherhood, that you feel a personal tie and connection, a sacred tie, one might say, to brethren across the entire world that you haven't even met, but you're friendly with. So that would be a good description of how fellowship kind of works. So fellowship itself is categorized by a shared commitment. We have shared purpose. We have shared values and shared obligations. And it creates a collective closeness amongst people who would have never been potentially as close. And that's one of the most beautiful things in this fraternity. And actually, I'd argue one of the most important things in this fraternity is as fostering a sense of fellowship.
I would argue the same thing because I'm putting it in perspective from our own experience, right? Obviously, we started out at some point just enjoying fellowship together without really being friends, right?
Yep.
We had a shared common interest of Freemasonry. I was here already. You were coming in. You were curious about everything. You started going through your degrees. We had a common interest. We could communicate very well about that common interest, right? And we enjoyed doing so. And eventually, spending enough time in that fellowship led us to talk about other things outside of Freemasonry, but without and become friends and now co-hosts on the podcast, which will probably destroy our friendship at some point, but
but we'll still maintain fellowship.
Right. We'll still maintain fellowship. But where was I going with that before I tried to crack a joke in there? So we started in fellowship because of a common interest. And we had that shared common interest. We probably, honestly, without Freemasonry, would have never crossed each other's paths, potentially. And even if we had, we probably wouldn't have
developed a friendship
over it. It would have probably been a passing meeting because we didn't have enough without the fellowship of Freemasonry to really start a conversation that would lead us down the road to realize all the other stuff we have in common, right?
And that's like one of the most important aspects of Freemasonry is that we create fellowship. What is fellowship? That's brotherly love, okay? We talk about it all over the place. And it is the ability to bring people from all walks of life to a common level, okay? You could even say the level is a representation of fellowship. It's a mutual respect and general kindness and friendship. And within that, it develops into closer friendships with, that just naturally is a byproduct of maintaining a source of fellowship. And so how do Masons do this? We were talking about how we like to do social events. That's a good form of creating fellowship, but also the fact that we do shared ritual, shared meetings, shared dinners, experiences reinforces a common fellowship amongst a group of men. And the way that we have similarities with how we do it between lodges from here to far up north to everywhere in the country, it's a shared fellowship symbolically because it's all so similar that you could walk into a lodge in the Philippines and feel a similar connection to their system. And it's something that's super cool within Masonry.
Right. And, I think it's important to remember that stems, brotherly love and everything is fellowship. Now, are you going to be friends with everyone you enjoy fellowship with? No, probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like that's just, it's not going to work that way. However, you don't have to be friends to enjoy fellowship. And honestly, if you're all there, and you're doing like a social event, if there's enough people enjoying fellowship, you probably don't even have to interact with that person, but you can still be at fellowship with them.
Well, and the key is it emphasizes like unity of purpose. You might not get along with every single brother you meet, but you can meet together for that shared purpose and your shared commitment to Masonic ideas. And the lodge itself is like a symbolic meeting place. You're saying, I'm here to have a focal point for my fellowship, okay? We can all find a way to be friends, or friendly, I should say, within this space when we're here together within our fellowship to have shared, experiences and a collective resolve to try to be better men and better Masons. And it's all reminiscent. I mean, this has been in our face the whole time. Behold, how good and pleasant it is for brethren to dwell in unity. It is the prescient ointment upon the head that ran down upon the beard, even Aaron's beard.
Even my beard.
Oh. Even Matt's beard, and went down to the skirts of his garment, as the dew of Hermon, and the dew that descended upon the mountain of Zion, for the Lord commanded blessing, even life forevermore. It's right in our faces at all time that we are being charged to create an atmosphere of fellowship.
Right. And fellowship is such an interesting thing to like talk about, because when I try to like wrap my head around this idea, right? You can put a bunch of men in a room that are all potentially very different, and we can get along even outside of that room because we share this common goal, right? And common interests. We can all get along. We can all put our differences aside, but we don't all have to be friends, but we should all be kind to each other.
Brothers.
Sounds familiar. Universal benevolence. I think we talked about that a bunch on the last episode, I should say. But you have this ability to enjoy each other's company for the sake of accomplishing a common purpose. And then you can totally go away and go hang out with your friends. But it removes the clickiness of it, because when you're at those times of fellowship, you should be able to pretty much hang out with anybody.
Well, and the byproducts of fellowship is like, okay, so traditionally speaking, traditional friendships are formed around people who are doing very similar things. Could be a work friend, could be someone you went to school with, could be et cetera, et cetera. So like when you're in school, you are in a fellowship with everyone in the school. because you have a shared reason to be there and a shared mission. So you'll see a lot of friendships in general, if you think about it closely, have all come from a sort of fellowship. You might have joined a band club with them. That's a fellowship. You're there for a common purpose. So it's actually a very natural human thing. And the nice thing about Masonry is it broadens the territory of that fellowship. So instead of being limited to a very specific hobby, people in Masonry come from hundreds of different walks of life, hundreds of different interests, and they're put into a fellowship where they can make some very unique friendships with people they would have never come in contact with. And I think, it comes from the fact, too, that during the Enlightenment, when these thinkers, that's a lot of where Masonic philosophy comes from. Right. A lot of them had this shared vision of a universal fellowship. So even during the French Revolution, the three tenets of the French Revolution were liberty, equality, and fraternity. Fraternity is almost a synonymous word with fellowship. And they're saying that we need to find a way as a world to find a common fellowship with our fellow men and, people around us. And so it's interesting that in Masonry that we try to practice a sense of common shared respect that hopefully can flow into the world with making relationships.
Right. And I think ultimately, even if you take it, into a different context slightly, fellowship allows for the ability to have a support system. You have people outside of your own circle, your own close circle that you can bounce stuff off of, and you can have productive conversations with, and maybe eventually a friendship would then also grow there. But it allows you to have like you talked about, broader variety of people, get a broader variety of opinions on what you might be going through at the time, if you're willing to talk to it, talk about it with those people, and maybe it'll show you a different pathway to solve the problem.
And I think that's an important distinction. So it's when you're in fellowship, it's not that you're there to make friends. That's a byproduct of the fellowship.
Right.
But when you're in fellowship, you're in a place of mutual comfort. Okay. So this could be, you're at church. That's a fellowship. Yeah. People call each other fellows in some places there, where you have people that, maybe they're not your friends, but there's a comfort level. And so within that comfort level, there's a comfortability for encouragement from people who aren't even your friends. They're just your fellows or your brethren, encouragement, as well as possibly necessary criticism. So within that shared respect, you're actually able to get lots of opinions to help, like we keep saying, iron sharpen iron,
right,
through a really wide net of good men. And I think within the fraternity, that's so integral to our success as a organization and as a society, is that we try to foster a strong sense of fellowship.
So how do we, okay. So obviously, like in Masonry, it's pretty easy. It just happens, right? Because we all have a very, very heavy shared experience, right? Like
the system lends itself to creating it.
Right. It lends itself well to creating fellowship because we have shared experience and at the end of the day, at least one shared interest, right? Which would be Masonry. Right.
Yep.
But like something like school, like you brought up earlier, right? Like, especially let's take it back to like a grade school. Yeah, you're all there for the one common goal of like learning, right? But that's a much more loosely defined aspect of fellowship, right? So if we say the world, and that lends itself to being able to be cliquey and bullies and everything else, because the shared experience isn't strong enough.
It's more like the clubs within the school are closer to defined fellowship.
There we go. Okay.
They're all within fellowship, but I'm saying that within Masonry, we're trying to create that similar system. So if we're trying to talk, let's say, okay, here's a good question. We like to do applied stuff here. Masonry I would argue Masonry gives you the seeds of fellowship in its inherent system, but you can have less close and more close lodges. So as a lodge, it is your goal to create a culture of fellowship. So let's talk about what do we think would be some good ways that we do create a culture of fellowship in our lodges?
Ooh, that's a good question. And that's kind of where I was trying to take us, actually, even though I wasn't prepared right away. But I was trying to take us down that road because there's a difference in the level of fellowship, right? You can have a loose fellowship where you have a shared common interest, right? Or you have a shared common goal.
Or shared common space you have to be in.
Right. Or shared space you have to be in. And then there's the tighter, the more impactful fellowship where you want to be in fellowship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like not just for the purpose of that goal or because you have to be in the same space. It's something you choose to do.
It's more binding. The cement's more tightly bonded. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It was a stronger version of Gorilla Glue versus the Dollar General super glue, right?
But I mean, okay, if you think about it, in the school analogy, the way they create those fellowships is they create various spaces that brothers of various interests can, or students, I should say, can find a closer sense of fellowship. So I think how I like to think about it is we always say the tenets of Freemasonry are brotherly love, relief, and truth. In my mind, the way I see brethren's interests are they have those three buckets that they have preferential.
Right.
Some people like to do very social things, brotherly love. They like to have casual hangouts. They like to do fun things, and they like to fraternize with brethren. Then you got the relief. Some brethren like to go out and work for community service. Mm-hmm. They like to give back to their community or do small little events and things like that. And then there's truth. Some brethren like to study and to learn and be mentally stimulated.
Right.
And so what I like to think about when I'm looking at how to build stronger fellowship in lodges is you're going to have brothers who have varying interest in all three of those buckets. And it's finding a way in your scheduled year to try to provide value for all three.
Right. And I mean, you can even break it out more from there, right? Like, you know, and it all depends on the size of your lodge and how well you truly know like a bunch of the brothers. But, you know, maybe, right, like education at every stated meeting is going to be enough.
Or a book club
or truth guys, right? Mm-hmm. You know, or, you know, a blood drive and working.
The bell ringing, like we talked about last
podcast. The bell ringing or polling election stations. It's going to be enough for the relief part of it. And then doing like axe throwing and Lux golf or, you know, whatever.
Various meals.
Right. Whatever is going to be good for the brotherly love crowd. Right. And if you have all three, and you're going to have guys that like doing all three of them too. Right. Yep. And they're going to be at all that stuff because, hey, that's what they like doing. But you can break it down even more if you know your lodge well enough.
Yep.
You got, you know, your hunting fellowship, your pool playing fellowship, your whatever, you know, like, but you can, it's interesting in the terms of a Masonic lodge because you can have these little buckets of fellowship, but at the end of the day, all of them can still come together in one big bucket of fellowship where they're all going to be hanging out.
Well, and as you're addressing all the niche fellowships and they're still having to have larger meetings, I mean, the key is you want to make sure that you keep your various pathways open to all within the fellowship so it doesn't become a clique. But you'll find that brothers of certain interests will come to some things and not other things, but you want to make sure that no one is being left out because there's nothing for them. And so the key is finding that variety, because I think that all Masons contain all three of those buckets in varying levels of interest. I think at the small level, they'd be like, I'm not that into community service, but my brothers are doing it, I'm going to go. And so they will build that influence, but it builds those ability for those various types of interests to still meet in fellowship. And by doing so, start to develop new friendships and more comfortability to work as brethren.
Yes. I am going to circle back to something real quick. Click. We always say clicks. You gotta make sure you don't have cliques. I'm going to say something really unpopular. There's nothing wrong with cliques.
Unless they're a toxic clique.
Cliques are naturally going to happen. The people that get along the best are going to naturally end up hanging out in a clique, right? Air quotes for those listening at home. There's two different kinds of cliques, though. There's a bad clique and there's a good clique. The bad clique is the closed clique that doesn't let anybody else join the clique.
And is toxic and judgmental towards other cliques. And they throw their weight around.
Potentially all
Think
that.
of Mean Girls.
But let's just simplify into it's not a group of jerks, right? It's just a clique, people that get along. There's still a bad clique if they close their doors and they don't let anybody else join said clique anymore, right? And then there's the good cliques where it's people with common interests that are going to hang out and naturally want to hang out and be closer than the whole group somewhat. Right?
I mean, it's just a group who have developed into friendships.
Right. But they're open and they're willing to let new people in. That's fine.
It's just going to happen. We have to be practical.
Right. That's naturally how people are going to organize themselves, right? I mean,
but within the context of the lodge, the key is to not let your friendships turn into a negative, toxic, unharmonious clique, because we always have to remember that within the context of Masonry, we have to be maintaining the fellowship as well,
right?
Especially when you're in fellowship. So like, if you're like, hey, I invited a couple of Masons over to watch a Packer game, that's fine. That's not within fellowship. That's just you hanging out with your friends at that point. They happen to be Masons. Lovely. But when you start to maintain that when you're in fellowship time, it can become problematic. Whereas like, so for example, during meals, I've been in the kitchen for so long that I'm actually a bad advice on this because I don't get to sit and eat. But I would always try to sit with different groups because I'm like, I'm not at friend time. I will have friend time later. I'm at fellowship, so I should be sitting with new people to maintain a common fellowship with all the brethren I can. And I think that's great advice for every Mason because, for example, like, at Lake, we'll go out and have drinks after lodge at a pub when we're done. And it's like, hey, when I'm at lodge time, I'm going to make sure I'm spreading my wings and talking with everyone. But then when we're at social hour, I might pair off a little bit and hang out with my friends.
Right.
But to make sure that you give time for both.
Right. Well, no, and I think that's important. I was just more so getting at, like, if you're going to, define cliques as naturally bad, it's only if they're closed or they get toxic, but typically a clique that's open and willing to accept new people isn't going to be toxic like that, right? We're talking about the same thing with a closed off clique that segregates themselves from everybody else. You know what I mean?
Well, and the good cliques they're not sitting there writing like, let's see if we can accept this guy. They're just more naturally open to whoever wants to hang out with them can hang out with them and be friends. But the thing is within fellowship, friendships do develop amongst groups of people who have similar, more intimate friendships.
Right.
And that's natural and that's normal. And that's actually a good thing. But they need to remember too that we're all brothers, that within that time, you have to suspend and all meet on the level. And I think that's, how you can kind of check and balance and circumscribe your friendship.
Right. Right. No, and I agree. And I think it is important, like whether it be at dinner before lodge or, if you go out after lodge, that you spread your time around. I know now that I'm out of the kitchen, which is strange, I know I try to sit with like candidates most of the time, right? So wherever these new guys checking out the lodge are, or EAs or FCs are, that's usually where I try to sit, even though, I could go sit with the group of guys I always hang out with, right? But I want to try to break myself of that habit even because I feel
sit with past masters too.
Yeah, I want to go sit with like some of the other people because I feel like I kind of I take myself out of the mix by I make sure I say hi to everybody and greet everybody and speak with everybody, but like I have this super high level focus on these like new guys, and that's important, but it's also important to hang out with the other guys too. Right?
And I mean, that's a good opportunity to leave it up to their mentors to kind of like when you're mentoring someone, don't sit with anyone. Just sit with your candidates and get them comfortable because you're basically trying to introduce them to the fellowship. So when you're new, I remember the hardest thing about coming into a lodge is you're being thrust into a fellowship that you don't feel very brotherly or fellowly with because you don't know these people.
Right.
And, we've said it in the past that one of the best ways to start to really enjoy Masonry is to make an effort to create that fellowship feeling. So getting to know everyone, sitting at different tables, meeting different brethren is step one for a new Mason coming into a lodge, is to integrate with the fellowship and start to build that common comfort and that common purpose with all the brethren within there. And I think it's important to actually, when you are in lodge, think of it like we always say, like you're in the dojo, and be like, hey, I'm here. We're doing fellowship time. It means it's time to build fellowship with my brethren. I'm not going to just hang out with my friends or the people I'm most comfortable with. I'm going to put myself out there and meet and build this brotherhood with all the members of the lodge.
Right.
I think it's like, it's this cool thing. And I think it is one of our biggest selling points when they're like, what are you? And we're like, we're a fraternity. What we're saying is like, we are a fellowship and we have fellowship amongst our brethren. And it's an integral part of the Masonic ethos. And it basically really is what builds the richness of the Masonic experience. It's this harmonious interplay that Freemasons continue to do throughout hundreds and hundreds of years of time. That is a cultivation of virtuous men who are bound together by the principles, and we're receiving nourishment from various activities of brotherly love, relief, and truth.
I think I'm struggling with like trying to come up with what to say for some of this, because not to give ourselves a pat on the back or anything, but I feel like Lake organically like has it. Like I never felt like there was a struggle for fellowship since I've been here. Like I just feel like it just happens and the new guys just seamlessly end up falling in. And I feel like,
but that's through the efforts of
right.
Yep.
It's through the efforts of people, and I understand that being on the other side of it now, right? Like we've made the efforts to make it inviting and open like that. But I think that's part of when you see a lodge that does it well, you can't explain necessarily what they're doing. They just do it. And when you see a lodge that does it poorly, you know they're doing it poorly, but you can't necessarily identify exactly what they're doing wrong. However, I think that if you're not doing it right. And I think
you can feel it. Yeah.
Lodges need to start paying more attention to that, because if they want to be able to build and grow, that's how it's going to happen, because a new person coming in is going to be able to identify if you're doing it poorly.
It's a vibe. You know how you can walk into a room. Okay, let's say we're watching the show Intervention. That person walks in the room and he doesn't know what they're there for, but he can feel that he's about to get it. Oh, yeah. Like you can feel an energy in a space, especially with a group of people, if it's a positive or a negative energy. And when a lodge is in healthy fellowship, it should have a warmth to it. And I've definitely walked into places where it feels either stale or in one indicator too quiet, and you know that fellowship isn't functioning as it should. Right. And I would argue it's been organic at Lake Lodge, like you were saying, because there's been generations of past masters who've been building an infrastructure and a culture around a focus on making sure that we're paying attention to a good fellowship. And, it seems organic because look at our event calendar.
Right.
It's stuffed. And it always has been since I've been here, with very frequent opportunities for fellowship. And so I would say it's not necessarily organic. This has been deliberately built at this lodge for a very long time, and we're inheriting that from past masters. And it takes, I think it takes a deliberate focus on building that culture within every lodge to create a self-sustaining ecosystem of fellowship.
There we go. I was just going to say, I'll amend what I said to it's been built into the point that it is now organic. And that's just the way things are, right?
And it would take, and the more it's built and the stronger those roots, the deeper those roots grow, the harder it is to pluck out. And, when a lodge is trying to do a building phase and they're trying to get their, right their ship, that's when it's the most sensitive, because I think it does take multiple masters of a lodge to start to plant the roots that it needs to build a strong foundation of fellowship. And you'll find that I feel like it's like reaping what you sow. And you'll see that when a lodge is able to create that ecosystem, it starts to self-sustain with more membership and more people because it is fruitful in fellowship. And that's the foundation of our ability to meet, act, and part harmoniously as brethren.
Right. The acacia doesn't give way so easily at years of root growth.
Yep.
So I think it is important that and if you feel like your lodge maybe could be doing better at it, start trying to grow those roots now. Start small. Start with one event. Right.
If you haven't been cooking food in your lodge, start cooking food and having meals.
If you have the facilities to be able,
or cater it, or at least make a meal, or at least make an opportunity for a time of fellowship between brethren. And honestly, guys, if you walk into a room, even your own lodge, you can feel if there's strong fellowship very quickly in that space. And that could also mean, is it just one clique that's having fun? You keep an eye out because you got to make sure that the fellowship is maintained within the entire space too. And, I think it takes self-reflection and good planning to start to undertake the building of a fellowship culture.
Yep. And remember that somebody who's there to learn about your lodge, whether it be a master mason who's traveling or potential candidate, they're going to be able to tell if the air when they walk in is warm and light, or if you can cut it with a knife.
Yeah, and that's also a good reminder too. Pay attention to your guests and visitors because they're not a part of your fellowship. So they might need a little bit of help getting into the door of that vibe. And we always have people who, if someone new walks in, I'll have the master come up to me and be like, Andrew, this guy's in. I don't have time to talk to him. Can you please grab him? Just keep him, start introducing him to people, start getting him into the fellowship because especially if you're not a super gregarious person, that's a very intimidating undertaking to walk into. And having some brother take your hand and say, welcome, brother, and walk you into it, or to a potential candidate, hi, welcome to our lodge. Let me show you around and to let you meet people helps that process of having them join the fellowship.
Right. And I've done that a number of times where it's been like I've been on my way from point A to point B to take care of something, and I get introduced to somebody along the way that needs to be like, I'm the only person he's met at the lodge at that point. And it's like, all right, take him, go, I'll grab somebody else and be like, I have to get this done, but you're in good hands with this brother. He's going to introduce you to some people. Or I've been 45 minutes into a conversation with somebody and I've grabbed another brother and been like, hey, you should talk to this guy because you'd actually have a lot in common as well. And it would be good for him to understand that there's other people here he can get along with, right?
If you see a brother who is not within the moments of fellowcraft and is just like staring at pictures or wandering around lonely, that's a good indicator that he needs a little help getting introduced to the fellowship. And I think you see it all the time where you had him with one brother, he kind of walked away, had to do something, and then he's kind of left like a fish out of water. And I think it's a good skill as a welcoming lodge to keep an eye out. And if you see that, go over and just be like, hey, come with me, come on. Hey, this is so-and-so, this is so-and-so. They've been past masters for 35 years. Why don't you guys get to know each other? And to help them through the process of integrating with a lodge. It's hugely important, and it can really make or break if a candidate is going to be an active member or an inactive member, is their ability to become a part of the fellowship and the comfort that is built in with that brotherly love. And that's, it's not something that you are gifted. It's something you have to work for. And it's something as brothers we should be helpful with too.
Right. And I think it's important also to identify those people that, especially in the beginning, later on, sit them with anybody, but especially in the beginning, we all know that there's certain brothers that it's better to have them hang out with than others.
Who are good at it, yeah.
Right, who are good at it, who are good at sussing out like what to talk to somebody about, right? And
the talkers.
Right, right. And then you have other brothers who, maybe on the 6th or 7th meeting, they'll finally get comfortable enough to, but that's not somebody you want on a first meeting type of deal.
Well, and there's some people that they decided to do a charity event together. They work with that brother, and now they struck up conversation over the job they're doing, and they can start to build fellowship that way too.
Right.
Not everyone just builds it because I'm a chatty Cathy.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Like, you know what I mean. You have your better people to stick, like, especially a new candidate with, right?
Which is a lot of times me. And I mean, I can talk forever. So, I mean, that's
like Tom and Art.
Yep. Tom and Art. Oh, they're my go-tos. It usually goes to me and then I take it to them. It's nice to know that who are the one. I mean, that's the thing is we're identifying skill sets within the lodge. And yeah, a new candidate is, I don't want to say fragile, but they can be. They don't know what this is, and they need someone warm and who's well educated and informed to make them feel welcome and answer questions. And there's not every brother has to be a charismatic talker. They have other skill sets that they're being lobbied in other areas. So it's nice to know who to use for what and to identify who should actually. And I was told last year by the master, I want you to focus on this year. Keep an eye out on the floor for this type of thing to say, hey, you're good at this. Please make sure you're welcoming people. I would like you to have the pulse on this for me. And, that can be helpful too.
Right. For sure. I think we pretty much killed this topic.
I like it though.
I do like it. It's a interesting one to navigate because they're so close, but so different.
They're so close and so different, but they are integral parts of Masonry. And the friendships that form are the bedrocks of our order a lot of the times, but they're only fostered through fellowship. And so to have really close friendships, which is often what makes people stay, is they have true close friends. It's created an ecosystem of fellowship. And I think if there's one takeaway the brethren can take is, how is fellowship at your lodge? Is it awesome? Maintain it. Does it need work? Let's get to work on it then. And it's like in the last episode, we're talking unsullied must be your constant care. Same with for fellowship. You have to make sure that you maintain that environment because it's more fun. Everyone has more fun when there's good stuff going on.
Exactly. And, it's just fellowship's good. I'm trying to create a new fellowship among the Masons of District 12. Well, the worshipful masters of District 12.
It is what you are doing is a fellowship, trying to do a meeting of masters. That's creating a master's fellowship. I mean, literally everything is fellowship in my mind right now. But like an example, we're doing a podcast called Time for Fellowship because now everyone who listens can talk with other people who listen about this podcast. This is another fellowship.
Ooh.
And we need
fellowship of time for fellowship.
The fellowship of time for fellowship. It's super meta. And, if you know anyone who'd be interested and wants to join you in our fellowship, just give them a shout and let them know that we're out here. And we'd love for them to listen and join us in fellowship sometime.
We always want more people in our fellowship.
We're very fellowship forward. And so
that sounded creepy intentionally. I'm sorry. I thought that.
So, you want to do some news and events?
Sure, let's do some news.
All right, time for some news. Matt, kick us off.
All right, so Pine Lodge number 188 in Oconto was honored during their joint installation of officers with the Benjamin Franklin Award from the Supreme Council of the Northern Masonic Jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite for 150 years of being around as a lodge. So congratulations, Pine Lodge, on your huge accomplishment of 150 years.
That's such a long time.
It is.
It's a huge accomplishment. It's great to see a lot of these lodges are hitting their 150th. It's just really cool. A lot of history of masonry in Wisconsin. Sheboygan Lodge actually did something very cool recently. Sheboygan Lodge number 11 had the newest master mason at their lodge, Tony Bleasner. If I pronounced that wrong, I'm so sorry. Tony actually had a really cool idea. Tony had been really involved with the Salvation Army for a number of years and had kind of explained to the lodge that a lot of homeless people have been falling through the cracks lately. And in this giving season, there's limited warming options at their local shelter. So he got together with the master of the lodge, Jay, and they actually decided to partner with the Boy Scouts Pack 3861 and create some more or less warming bags, I could describe it as. So each backpack contained a fleece blanket, a Mylar emergency blanket, a knit hat, gloves, toiletries, and a Bible. And so they were able to very quickly, through the ideas of a new Master Mason, very cool, get some really well-needed support for the homeless. Very awesome.
That is very awesome. I know those, been hearing about those backpacks for like the homeless popping up as programs a lot of different places. It's a really cool idea. It's really cool that a new Master Mason brought that to his lodge. So
it's a great example of what we keep talking about is, if you have ideas, lodges should be willing to entertain them. And look at this. They did something very great and some really good work. And, great job, guys. Good job, Sheboygan Lodge.
Awesome. Nice work. All right, so if you're listening to this the day it comes out, January 11th, 2024, tonight at Lake Lodge is the Order of the Rusty Nail. Dinner's at 6. Rusty Nail degree will start right around 7 after we open Lodge and bring anybody who's here for it in. If you haven't been to Lodge in a while, if you know somebody that hasn't been to Lodge in a while, if you just want a refresher and a cool lapel pin, stop at Lake Lodge tonight and get your Order of the Rusty Nail. The boys in the officer line have been putting a lot of work in for this one. Very much the senior deacon, junior warden, senior warden, and myself, plus one of the stewards who's doing the special charge. But they all have really big parts in it. It was a different type of ceremony to memorize, so please stop on by and see the Order of the Rusty Nail. Even though Andrew probably will be at home with his baby.
Chilling.
January 13th, Damascus Lodge, number 290. It's not just a number, it's a goal. Has their installation of officers, I believe, at 1 p.m. at the Lake Masonic Center. January 19th, at the Wisconsin Masonic Center, the American Red Cross is having a blood drive from 1 to 5 p.m. in the Wisconsin Masonic Center Ballroom out there in Madison. You can visit redcrossblood.org and fill out your stuff. The sponsor code is WI Masonic Center. Walk-ins are welcome if you don't make an appointment ahead of time. And on January 25th, Lake Lodge will be hosting their 22nd annual Robert Burns Table Lodge from 6 to 9 p.m. Ceremonial toasts, poetry, haggis, roast beef, good eats. Past Grandmaster Paul Torville will be the guest speaker. Costs $35 a person. Reservations are due in 1 week, January 18th. Send checks to the Lake Masonic Center, care of Robert Burns. Please make those checks out to Lake Lodge, I believe. And if you want to pay cash, get a hold of one of us at Lake.
I think you could send cash in too. I know people don't like to do that very much.
No, don't.
Just send a check, it's safe.
Send a check, it's safer. But if you would absolutely like to pay cash, please get a hold of one of the officers of Lake Lodge and we will figure something out.
Yep, we're pretty lenient and helpful. Coming up in February, let's move on to February 3rd. We got the District 12 Masonic Day of Light at the Triple I Shrine. So if you have any candidates going through that, make sure you have your stuff filled out. Lake Lodge is actually doing the Entered Apprentice degree, so you can see me and Matt there. It'll be a big, long day, a lot of education, good stuff, so check it out. On February 17th, Waterloo Lodge number 63 is doing their Valentine's Day luncheon. The social hour starts at 11 a.m., meals at 12 p.m., cost is $50 per couple, and that's going to be at the Stable Rock Winery and Distillery in Jefferson. And if you'd like to RSVP, please reach out to Brother Dan Slavic. You can find his information in our lodge or however, and you can make your checks payable to Waterloo Lodge number 63. On the 24th, the Masonic Acts of Kindness Gala fundraiser is happening at the Eau Claire Masonic Center. It's a great event. It's usually a lot of fun. They traditionally do raffles. They have various forms of entertainment. On March 1st, Lake Lodge 189 is doing our axe throwing night. Who's good at axes? One way to find out. little bit of competition. We kind of see who threw out the best axes. It's going to be from 7 to 9 p.m. and it's open to friends, family, whoever. Just come on down and join us. It's going to be at the North-South Club. And if you'd like to go to that, RSVP with Jeff by February 16th. That's going to be Jeff Teely. You can find his email in our lodge. March 9th, Tom Torville's Interstate Lodge's Table Lodge is having a table lodge. The social hours are going to start at 4 p.m., meals at 5 p.m., and that's going to be at the Toma Masonic Center. Please RSVP to District 5's District Deputy Jacob R. Schultz, and that's at dd5 at wisconsinmasons.org, or you can reach him out to him via his phone. On March 23rd, the Valley of Lacrosse Scottish Rite is doing a reunion at the Lacrosse Masonic Center. It's going to be from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's going to be including the Madison Scottish Rite Feast of the Paschal Lamb. And that's events.
Awesome. Excellent. Thanks for listening, everybody. And Andrew, good luck with the new arrival, probably by the time this podcast comes out.
It will definitely have happened because if it doesn't, there's going to be induced a week before this. So no matter what, it's going to be a different time for me next time you hear from me. But as always, thank you for listening. Please get the word out about our podcast. If you know any friends or brethren who'd be interested, we'd love to have them on this journey with us.
And if you have anything to say to us, timeforfellowship@gmail.com.
Timeforfellowship@gmail.com.
Or any of our social media platforms.
Thanks for listening, guys. Till next time.
Have a good one.